Are you ready to start the next bit?
Right.
There we go. So hopefully we're ready to go there. Just make sure I'm on here. Right. So first of all, apologies to anyone who was hoping for a live stream for the first session. We are now back online and able to live stream the second session. So if you missed the first bit, you'll have to work with the audio, I'm afraid. Right, so this now is the session that we need for, especially for the lab. So just for those who are not here, if they're following the live stream or the audio, things you'll need to note from this morning are there's a bit about forms, make sure you're up to speed on that. Also, we didn't mention the video. Video 5, remind me what video 5 was. That was the JSON feed, wasn't it? But video 6, it would be worthwhile making sure you watch video 6 before the lab, because video 6 is talking about how do you do object PHP. So you'll have, so this will be the theory, this will be the examples that you might want to go back to in the lab to check, but the video will concretise it and give you a specific example on the Aging Surface website that will show how you use object PHP in that context, plus a few other little tricks along the way, incidentally. Okay, so we're going to look at PHP Basic and so Basic PHP and also object-oriented PHP. And again, my credits to Magnus, who created the original set of slides. Now noticing that I've been talking for an hour already. Okay, so what we're going to aim to do in this session is we're going to aim to review some PHP basics. We'll discuss the specific PHP concepts, we'll provide some examples and answer some questions. That's the idea. So the basic stuff, this should be revision hopefully from last week and the lab and so on, but at this stage I think probably you find it helpful to just be reminded of stuff. So look at variables, built-in PHP functions and functions generally. So last week we were thinking about the fact that you can have a string. So $module, we're not strongly typed, so that could be anything, but we now create it as a string variable by doing that. Okay. We might instead put a number there too, and then that will create $number as an int. You could have $module equals 2, and that would then be an int, and you could have $number equals, this is the Comp2203 module, and that would then be a string. It's this bit that determines what the variable is, not the name. It doesn't understand what those names mean, so you can call it $number and it could be not a number, for example. Or a boolean, $show is true, for example, or $logged in is true, is something we were looking at in the previous set of slides. We can print the variable to the page by saying echo $module, and what you get on the page is this is the Comp2203 module. Echo $number will give you 2, and echo $show, interestingly, will probably give you 1, because true and false are held as 1 and 0. True is 1, false is 0. So if you echo a boolean, you're more likely to get 0 or 1 rather than true or false. So what are some built-in PHP functions? Well, you know about echo, we've done that quite a bit now. We've got this idea, we can declare an array here, and is that right? A bit of homework for you. I think there's a syntax error on that. I think it should either be $array equals word array round brackets, or it should be $array equals square brackets. The square brackets is the later definition, which isn't understood by earlier versions of PHP, incidentally. somewhere around 5.3 or something, if I remember rightly, that the square brackets comes in. So square brackets will work only for later versions of PHP, but the word array round brackets should work on any version of PHP. It's probably less and less important to use the word array and round brackets now, because people are moving on from early versions of PHP. We should be on to PHP 7 by now, really. Though there are some 5s around. So having declared your array, but check me on that, this is thinking on my feet, and I think that's actually wrong. So printar will print out the structure of $array. Can you tell me the difference between printar and vardump? It's actually in the video. Oh, well, that might be video 6 though, so you might not have watched it yet. Well, I'll tell you the key issue is that printar is a pre-formatted text result. So if you just echo it, it just comes out as one long line in your web page. You have to do a pre/pre around it, and then it comes out nicely laid out, and you can see what it means. But the key difference is that print R, if the $array is null, if it's not declared or doesn't exist or whatever, you just get blank, which I find unhelpful. If you do vardump on $array and it's not been declared, you get null. It will tell you it's null. And I find that helpful in the early stages when you want to know, especially like if you're doing a JSON decode or something, you've gone and grabbed some data, you want to know, has it actually returned anything? Have you got anything there? Is it that it's empty, or is it that it's not even declared? That's an important distinction that you might want to know. So I think I've said in the video, I tend to use vardump initially, and then when I know I've got something, then I start using printar. But there's a bit of a choice in there, you can decide what you want to do. Some other things that you can use in a loop: exit, just drops out the loop; die, just give up. And you can't, if you've tried to access some important data from a database, that connection's failed, you now can't render the page, just die, give up, can't do this, connection failed. Is null, that's really important. You were about to do a for each maybe, but if the array is null, don't even go there. You could find you setting yourself up for problems. So you might want to check whether what you've got is null. Is it set? Has this variable even been declared? So that's another really useful one, especially when these are the sorts of things you use a lot in web servers, because you want to know, has this variable, if you're doing gets or posts from a web exchange, from a form, you want to know whether it was even set or whether it was left blank or something. Is it empty? So that's, is it even declared? That's probably your coding if it isn't declared. Is it empty? Your coding's probably all right, but someone's not entered something in there. And for each we know about. So there's a load of different functions that are available to you in PHP that can be really useful. If you need to check something, you can probably find a function that will check it for you. Okay, I'll have a drink, sorry about this. Okay, so this again I hope is a reminder where we're looking at what's the structure of a function, and to keep it tidy on here I've used that there, but when I'm coding I bring that bracket there in line, you know about that. So calc total, we've got item 1 is 20, item 2 is 100, total is item 1 plus item 2. You would never do that in a real function, but we're just demonstrating the point. Return the total. So echo calc total result will be, it will return an integer, 120. And you can say echo total equals calc total, result total equals 120. That's what you get on the web page. Functions called within other functions, yes. So here we've got the same original function, but now we're going to have a function present total. So we will get total equals calc total, and we'll return the total amount is pound sign and then the total. So when I do echo present total, it will give me the total amount is £120, for example, and what we've done is we've called a function which is then calling another function inside it. Yeah, that's fine for now. What about passing variables through? Again, we looked at that in the videos at least. Here we've got, this makes much more sense. You wouldn't have the actual amounts within the function, it makes no sense. So function calc total, we give it calc1 and $calc2, and then $total is $calc1 plus $calc2, and we'll return $total. Actually, it still doesn't make an awful lot of sense, because there is already a function that does calc total, and it's called plus. The plus sign is exactly that. But hey, we're just looking at it for, to give us an idea of how these things work. So now our function present total, item 1 equals 20, item 2 equals 100, total equals calc total, $item 1, $item 2, and then return the total amount is pounds, whatever, and we can do our present totals before. So the main issue here is how do we pass the variables in through that, but we've done that last week. It's just a reminder really. This bit is more important, so can you tell me anything about scope of variables from other stuff you've done?
So where the variable is declared is where it sort of exists?
Yes. Yes. So typically, in order to make our code robust, it's nice if we say, if I've got a dollar value here in this function, it only exists within this function. So if I forget and use dollar value over there in that function, in the early days, I can tell you, we didn't have any concept of local and global variables. Every variable was global, and if you accidentally reused a variable name, it caused havoc, and it took forever. If you've got hundreds of lines of code, it took forever trying to work out where you'd reuse the variable name inappropriately and messed up your logic. Basically, in those days, you had to draw up a table of all the variables you used to make sure that you didn't reuse a variable inappropriately. I'm glad we're not in those days. They were bad days. But you can change the scope of a variable. So the scope is what's the context in which that variable is defined. As it says here, in the previous examples, the variables had to be declared inside the function or passed into the function as a variable. You can declare a different state of scope for a variable, which allows you to do other things. So here, for example, this will not work. If you say $part1 is this is space and $part2 a sentence, then if you have function sentence, $sentence equals part1 dot concatenated dot part2, return $sentence. If you echo $sentence, I think you'll probably get null blank something or other. It's not going to work anyway. This does work. So same code, part1 is this is space, part2 a sentence, function sentence, global part1, part2. You've now brought in part1 and part2 from outside in effect. So now $sentence equals part1 concatenated with part2. That works, so you can return $sentence and it will return outside this is a sentence. So this little bit here enables you to create a variable that is brought in from outside. Okay, that's a little bit of sort of recap and a few other little tricks and things on function PHP. What about object PHP? I have a love-hate relationship with PHP in that PHP is loosely typed. That is a bad thing. You should have strongly typed code. Really, it's more robust. Basically, it's easier to make mistakes with a loosely typed language. The other thing is that PHP was designed as a functional language, so object PHP is bolted on top, and it leads to a few sort of problems. So strictly speaking, when we're talking about object-oriented languages, you would be talking about what? Not functions, but
Classes.
sorry.
Classes.
Yes, that wasn't where I was going really. Classes are not the same thing as functions,
Oh,
really.
methods.
Methods, that's it, yeah. So rather than functions, we should be calling them methods. But we define a class in object PHP which contains functions. No, it should be methods. Oh well, fine, whatever. And similarly, it's not obvious that what we're declaring in terms of variables within the class are attributes rather than other things. But it nevertheless it does improve the way things work, and we can use things like inheritance and encapsulation and so on that will make our code much cleaner and much tidier. So it is the way to go, and that's the way we're going to be going from here on in this particular lecture series. Okay, so what's the difference between a class and an object?
So a class is sort of like a blueprint, and an object is a implementation.
Perfect, thank you. So as it says here, the class is the blueprint, and what it doesn't say here is that, does it? No, the object is an instantiation.
Yeah, the second.
Yeah, it is, you're right. So it is all there. So I'm not too busy thinking about it and not looking at what's on the slide, you're right. If you like, it's like a class is like an architect's blueprint for a house, and when you build a house in a street, that's like the object that you built from blueprint. So as it says here, when you call the method, a method within a class, you're calling upon the object that you've instantiated. So how are we going to work with this? So we've got a class here that we're going to call a class module. So what have we got in module? Well, there's a couple of attributes which are public. So these can be, so once we've instantiated the class as an object, we can have object name will give us access to this variable, and object, I don't mean dot, I mean arrow, description will give us access to that attribute. Similarly, we've got two methods here, although they're called functions when we write them in PHP. The main one that I want to think about for now is this one, getInfo. So if we call the object get and then the method getInfo, it will return module. Right, this is the way this is done within object PHP. We want $name, but we can't say $name. We have to say, for this instantiation, this class, the name attribute. Okay, so that's within the class definition. That's how we access that variable. $this. That's minus greater than name to make an arrow. Is about $this, and this would be better all on one line. So that $this pointing to description. So the function getInfo says whatever the module is instantiated as with a name and description and so on. So when we instantiate the class to create an object, we call function $construct. So that's $construct, and that's a specific method that says now create an object of this class, and we have to give it two parameters in this definition, $n and $d, which feed in the values for name and description. Hey, this is getting a bit theoretical. Let's see an example of this. So let's instantiate the module. So we say $module equals new module, and the name is Comp2203, and the description is application scripting. That's how we instantiate it. Now we can use the getInfo method. $module getInfo returns module Comp2203 is about application scripting. You see where that's come from? Module blurb is about blurb. So let's look again. Module Comp2203 is about application scripting. So that's how it's pulled together. If we want to just get the module name, it is possible because we made the name public on that slide. Okay, so I can just say return, or maybe echo, depending on how we want to do it, $module .22. Okay, and that would just return Comp2203. Okay, I'm not going too fast or too slowly. You're happy with that so far? Okay, good. Okay, where else are we going here? So we've got, so that's our instantiations we had before. So we can change the description. So $module description equals, so I've now changed the description, which says application scripting, which has one coursework and an exam. So we've added a bit in there. Now when we use getInfo, it will return module Comp2203 is about application scripting which has one coursework and an exam. There is an argument in there about whether it's a good idea to make attributes like that accessible directly, because it's possible then to mess around and change things directly through the through accessing the attributes, and the class itself has no knowledge of the fact that that's been changed. So there is an argument that says you shouldn't make your attributes publicly accessible. You should only allow the attributes to be changed via a suitable function. And then if you change it through a function, or method I should say, I'm slipping into PHP terminology. So then if it's accessed through a relevant method, the method can make sure that not only does the change happen, but that the class knows that the change has happened. And then you can track that if something happens later on and needs to know that description's changed. It's just a little thought, but it can be good to think in those terms. Now we can extend classes, so this is all completely object thinking. So just as in object thinking you can extend a class, so in object PHP you can extend the class. So if you have a new kind of module but you want to use the same basic parameters and methods as the general one, you can extend it rather than copying it. So you have module class, which could be extended to be a language module class, or extended to be an advanced module class, either or both. So you could have class language module extends module, and we're going to add in another public attribute $lang for presumably the language, and in your public function you now need to have now this is interesting, the name and the description as before, and also $L. I'll come back to that in a minute. So as it creates as it instantiates the class as an object, it sets up the name to be $N, it sets up the description to be $D, and the language to be $L. Note that name and description aren't repeated, they're just brought in from the module definition elsewhere. Okay. And now we can say, we can have, for example, we've got another function in here that we've introduced. What's the module language? And we can say module, whatever the name is taught in whatever the language is. Okay. So that's going to be straightforward. I'll hang on to that for a minute and come back to this after the next slide. I just want to go on for a minute. So in this instance, so here's an example, we're going to say $lang module is a new language module, info 3005, really, application scripting, taught in Swedish. Okay. So if we now do a $lang module getInfo, it will return module Comp2203 is about application scripting, which is that right? Yes, it is, because that's the method that's come in from the general module thing. But I've now got this one as well, which I can now say $lang module. What's the module language? I can't do that in a normal module instantiation, but with a language module, I can do it. You can say module comp. That says info 3005. That should say info 3005, shouldn't it? Yeah, so it should say module info 3005 is about application scripting. This one will then say module info 3005 is taught in Swedish. That's because Magnus has a Swedish ancestry in his bloodline somewhere. That's why he likes Swedish. And I've kept that in there for that slide. I'm just going to come back. So sorry about the confusion there. That's another mistake. I've used those slides before and not noticed that mistake before. Okay. What's this all about? Well, that's really, really helpful sometimes, because it's if you put it on any parameter equals something, it means that, I think you can only do it at the end for reasons that will be obvious in a minute. It means that this parameter is now optional. You could just say, give me a new language module with a name and a description. And it will then make the assumption that the language is English, and it will put that in for you. So you can do a default. That's now an optional parameter, which is really helpful. And if it's not specified, it will assume English. But you can use it in all sorts of ways to have an optional parameter on your class, on your object that you've instantiated. Okay, so that's that one. So that's sort of gone in at least as deep as you will need for now, at least. But a few things in here about Google how a function works. If you copy code from the internet, it is obvious. That goes back to the comments on the labs at the start. Instead, understand what it does and write it to yourself, probably more efficiently. So you would have had an even higher mark on your lab this week had you taken the code that you got from the internet, remembered what I'd said in the lecture the previous Tuesday, and avoided the deprecated diamond bracket query and done diamond bracket query PHP, and possibly even looked. I mean, actually, I quite like the conciseness of the code that followed, but the equals bit is also deprecated, so that was another little issue there. So had you done that, I would have thought, yeah, now you've really done it. You found the right bit of code, and you've understood it in your context and updated it a bit. You've still got a very good mark. Okay, understand what the code does yourself and rewrite it yourself probably more efficiently. And this is a little thought that you can try. You could try when you're creating sites, thinking coursework and so on, try and break each other's sites, because it is invaluable testing. I don't think I've told you this one. I had, years ago, I was producing commercial code, and I'd got a technician working for me. I was working in university, but I was producing commercial code, and I'd got a technician working for me, who's, I mean, it demeans him to call him a technician almost. He's an incredibly talented coder in his own right, and he was also producing commercial code, but he was working as my technician. And I said, oh, just test this out for me, would you? And so he came over to the computer and leant on the keyboard. I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, didn't you program to track that if someone leans on the keyboard? Which was an interesting lesson. As it happened, I had tracked it, but it was a very good lesson about testing things and checking and aiming to break each other's sites. Well worth doing. Again, these are the two I use actually all the time for PHP and MySQL. Well, not that one for MySQL. W3C schools and PHP.net between the two. So your reference and your examples. But you found some good stuff elsewhere. There are plenty of other places as well. And that's it. We're actually finished nicely ahead of time. We don't need this afternoon's slot, so don't turn up at 4 o'clock, so I won't be there. And if you're following via live streaming, if you can get put off by us not being able to live stream at 9, then also don't turn up at 4, it won't happen. So I'll see you on Thursday at 2.
I had a quick thing. I don't know if you got my email. Would it be possible for me to leave the lab on Thursday a little bit early, about 4, because it's my dad's birthday in London, and it makes it a lot easier in terms of like travel. It's when my parents can pick me up.
Yes. Let me turn it off a minute.
Yeah.
So
So would I be able to, if I don't get it done in that time, I